At the moment, we are not really looking to do something equivalent to what the LLM providers are doing. I think what we were trying to do is to really assess the quality of our knowledge base and what does that mean. We will incorporate AI for our users ultimately in the context of making their lives a lot easier and productive on our site. The system is truly automated. We can completely automate all your work, especially in more complex tasks. I can totally see the foundational work, the simple questions, the simple programs. Absolutely, right? It makes a lot of sense for those to be solvable and through this new mode of this user interface. But ultimately, there is still a pretty large gap, especially for more advanced programming needs, where you're absolutely going to need to know how to debug it.
There's a growing expense eating into your company's profits. It's your cloud computing bill. You may have gotten a deal to start, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. What if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that. OCI is the next generation cloud designed for every workload, where you can run any application, including any AI projects, faster and more securely for less. In fact, Oracle has a special promotion where you can cut your cloud bill in half when you switch to OCI. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Skydance Animation and today's innovative AI tech companies who upgraded to OCI and save. Offer only for new U.S. customers with a minimum financial commitment. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/eye-on-AI. That's oracle.com/eye-on-AI, EYEONAI, all run together. Oracle.com/eye-on-AI. Why don't we start, Prashanth, by having you introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background, how you came to Stack Overflow, and some background on what Stack Overflow is and how it got started, and then we'll talk about the future.
Sounds great. Yeah, well, again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you. So my background is fairly straightforward. I have been in technology for a couple of decades. Started out as a software developer at companies like Nashville Semiconductor and Cabletron back in college, in fact, and then quickly realized that I was quite interested in understanding how tech companies worked and how they operated. So through a sort of a multi-dimensional career path in consulting, in banking, all focused on technology companies or technology functions or using technology in some fashion, then sort of landed in my first operating role at a company called Rackspace, which is in the cloud services space.
Sure.
I spent about 7 years at that company here in Texas. And that's the reason I moved from New York City back in 2012. And that was just a great experience learning how to really scale fast-growing businesses, building great teams, and especially entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial sort of endeavors, and that was an exciting thing to focus on. And then in 2019, after about 7 years of the company, I was approached about this role at Stack, and the whole mission was, the company is obviously well known as and I'm happy to explain what it is, but well known as a public platform that serves millions of people around the world. How do we transform it into an enterprise-focused company was the mandate. So given some of what I had done at my prior company at Rackspace, even though it was in a different industry, some of the fundamentals translated. So that's the reason I joined, and very, very excited about what we've accomplished over the past 6 years at this company. And I've been here, through a multiple couple different sort of interesting transitions along the way, and you alluded to one, so which I'm happy to talk about.
Yeah, and my understanding of Stack Overflow is it's kind of like Quora for coders, and I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're working on something, and you are looking for a solution or some piece of code that you can't put your fingers on. You go to Stack Overflow and, what do I do? And somebody sends you a solution. It's sort of a collaborative platform in that sense. And relatively live so that people aren't waiting overnight for an answer. How did it start? And I've always wondered why that function doesn't exist, or if it does exist, why Stack Overflow is dominated. Why that function doesn't exist on, say, GitHub or another platform.
I think it's absolutely, it's quite the journey since the company was founded back in 2008. And I have to say that I think the comparison with other sites like the ones that you mentioned, I think they oftentimes do get included in the kind of broader family of sites, but we're quite distinct in that when we were formed because the founders wanted to create a really authoritative knowledge base for technology information. So when developers and technologists were writing code, as an example, they could really get unstuck based on trustworthy guidance from the world's experts all around the world. So this is not a forum site, never been a forum site where people just have subjective conversations. We may open up new avenues, as I'll describe, to do more of that in the future. But the first, let's call it 16 years, 17 years of the company have been all around creating like this really accurate knowledge base of information, which is sort of the canonical answer to a question in technology. So that is, I would say, what's distinct about it. And over the past, again, as like I said, 16, 17 years, we have accumulated a community, thanks to their goodwill, have accumulated something like 60 million questions and answers on, again, every possible technology topic. And all that is very, very useful. Not only it has been useful in the past in the context of people just going to the site through, let's say, a Google search and finding an answer to their question when they're stuck, but also now in the context of leveraging this data for LLMs and agents and agentic AI inside companies, as I'll explain. So it's just been a really, really phenomenal exercise, a community exercise to bring all this human-generated expertise together and knowledge together to move humanity forward, which is, I think, which is amazing. The other question that you asked was around why hasn't this been, what's special about this? Why hasn't this been replicated by other platforms, et cetera? I think it comes down to sort of the problem that you're trying to solve. Ultimately, I think every product has a kind of a core problem that they're trying to solve. I think something like GitHub, and I can't speak for them completely, but I think but I can, from the outside in, obviously they came from the code sharing and code collaboration space. We've never been in the code collaboration space necessarily, but we have been in the technical knowledge sharing space. And so it's really, it's a great combination between something like the real code that's stored on a place like GitHub or any of the other repositories, which is phenomenal for collaborating on code as a team, but also then leveraging all the context that is on Stack Overflow, because it has all the background information on why code needs to be written a certain way, what are the right packages to be using, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a very different problem that it's solving relative to sharing code. Now, both platforms over time can do all sorts of things to expand and so on, and I'm sure both companies will approach it that way. But the original nexus of it was that it was in the two directions I described.
Yeah. How live is the platform? Again, I'm not a user, so I always imagine that it was, you ran into a problem, you could post a query and somebody around the world who's online and would see it. Or is it really a knowledge base, a massive FAQ?
Yeah, no, it's an astute question. It is a very live platform. So we have thousands of questions being asked literally on a weekly basis, which is great because we have millions of people all around the world that are not only being able to benefit from the collective goodwill of 16 years of contributions, but also they're able to answer questions that are open because they're experts on a certain topic and they get recognized for being experts, and that's amazing for not only their primary motivation, which is to help their fellow developer and technologist out, but as a secondary motivation, there will be obviously recognition, and that translates to all sorts of things like you get great jobs as a result of that. We have even a partnership with Indeed on our website where you're able to apply for jobs and so on. But the nature of the platform is again a very, very strict Q&A form factor where it's not a discussion. Again, it's a very specific question and a very specific answer. Now, very recently, what we have announced is that we're going to keep absolutely, because it's very important to have that accurate data set in the canonical answers. But we are now experimenting with even faster engagement modes in other parts of the site. So distinct from Q&A, we have opened up, for example, an ability for users to chat real time with each other, right? And so we have opened up that highway, if you will, which has been exciting to watch as we've exposed that. Ironically, that feature actually has existed for 16 years, but has been buried deep in the site for moderators, as an example, to be able to sort things out when things happen on the site. But we realized that some of the newer generation folks love to have instant access or directional guidance versus perhaps the canonical answer to get formed in pristine fashion. So we will experiment with other content types, even maybe discussions, which is another feature that we have, which is a little bit like not as strict as Q&A, let's say, but they've got their own sort of lanes, distinct lanes, so we don't pollute the site. And the idea is to have high quality information, but very community oriented type of interactions.
Yeah, and who decides what's canonical? I mean, who's the Pope, so to speak?
Yeah, indeed. So it very much the community. I think this is what's so fascinating about this site, is that this is a very much a self-reinforcing. The experts in the world have all sort of participated, are participating and contributing to the site, and the community votes up or votes down answers based on those actually being effective or not effective in getting people unstuck. And so it funnily enough, it works really, really well, because the intent behind the site and the rule sets that have been established governs the site in a way that rewards quality. It absolutely does the opposite for the maybe even a little bit more harshly than people would like. But it is definitely sort of a school of hard knocks when it comes to high quality canonical answers to questions.
And the hang on just a sec here. I can see this is I mean, two things. It's the live chat would be wonderful because things are changing so fast. I imagine it's hard to keep up with the question and answer side, but also as a knowledge base for training these coding agents and that sort of thing. Are you doing that? Are you building your own agent, or are you licensing the content to people that are building agents?
Yeah, a little bit of all of it, actually. So we back in 2023, what we started noticing is that when all the LLM providers started announcing their developments, we noticed obviously our data had been used by most of them. So we, if not all of them, because we are one of the few high quality. Again, speaking about this canonical knowledge base, we're one of the few places that has this high quality information set, which is quite very, very useful. And what we did was we actually first took an open source model and fine-tuned it with our own data, and we noticed something like a 30 percentage point improvement in accuracy. As we know, LLMs continue to hallucinate. They hallucinate less these days, probably because we have done all these licensing arrangements. But generally speaking, they do hallucinate. So, but the quality goes up dramatically when you use our data. So when we saw that, and we of course put up things like anti-scrapers, and we prevented people from grabbing the latest information or even the historical information, we started engaging with all the LLM providers, the cloud providers, etc. And over the past 18 months or so, have constructed a significant number of partnerships with everybody that you can imagine in the ecosystem. So everybody from the OpenAIs and the Googles to all the cloud providers and more. We have struck partnership deals, and these are not only licensing deals, just to be very clear, but they're also bi-directional in nature. So yes, we want to get paid for the data so we can invest back into our community platform, so that the world can keep going round and round that way. But also because we're solving real problems for these LLM companies. Because number one, you have what we call LLM brain drain. But if you don't actually have humans creating new knowledge with from their minds and documenting it, then how are these LLMs going to obviously train? And that's important. Even in a world of synthetic data, you're going to need human-generated knowledge. That's number one. Number two is when oftentimes, I'm sure, Craig, you tried it. You mentioned Rabbit as an example, but there is a complexity cliff with these AI chatbots or assistants or LLM models. At some point, they're going to tap out on complexity, and it's just going to say, "Here's the best I can do," and it's on you. Then you're on your own. And so when that happens, what we're trying to help Gen AI and LLM companies with is, hey, why don't you actually engage our community in that moment for the user? Why can't the user actually ask the question straight on Stack Overflow, straight from there? And then, by the way, we have a legal requirement for them to attribute our content every time our content is used in a black box answer, as an example, which I'll get to here in point number 3. But to be able to answer that question, again, generates new content on our website, and that knowledge can then get curated and added and pruned, etc., and obviously community curated, and that allows them to leverage all that data for future model training needs and other agentic needs over time. So that's the second issue. This AI, answers are not really knowledge all the time, and so we want help there. And the third issue is around trust, Craig, because around the hallucinations, only about 40% of our community trust what's coming out of AI models. So we have now made sure that all these partnerships require them to attribute our data and links to our original answers every time an answer is used in the context of an LLM answer. So those are the three big problems, along with these licensing agreements.
Yeah, on the link. Well, first of all, on the model that you guys fine-tuned with Stack Overflow, are you pursuing that? Is that a product that's going to become better and more comprehensive? I mean, are you competing with OpenAI and some of the others on code generation? I mean, Sam Altman's been out, or Dario has been out talking about how these systems are going to write complete code very soon.
Yeah, no, we don't, at the moment, we are not really looking to do something equivalent to what the LLM providers are doing. I think what we were trying to do is to really assess the quality of our knowledge base and what does that mean. We will incorporate AI for our users ultimately in the context of making their lives a lot easier and productive on our site, right? So as an example, we've integrated Google Gemini into our public platform and in our enterprise product called Stack Overflow for Teams, which is the private version of Stack Overflow that companies use. And we have thousands of enterprises using that product, where Google Gemini powers our public platform and provides assistance when users are trying to ask questions on the site. And Gemini gives them very friendly recommendations in the privacy of their Gen AI experience, versus sort of having to sort of do all that in public in the context of your other subject matter experts around the world, which is, by the way, addressing a historical concern that people have had about our site, where it's a little bit, it can be quite an experience for a newcomer, especially. So this allows a newcomer to feel a lot more welcome on the site. And then on the enterprise side, we have integrated our content into all parts of the workflow. So into the IDE, in Visual Studio Code, into Slack, into Microsoft Teams. So you can ask natural language questions in any of these places, along with, of course, on the platform, and to be able to get Gen AI summarized answers and real assistance. And we will take both these concepts, we'll keep improving these on both sides, on the public as well as the private. And the private one runs, by the way, on Microsoft Azure. So we work with everybody, and we think of ourselves as sort of Switzerland. And then over time, there may be other opportunities to help our users with more assistance on the site. We even launched about in 2023 an AI search and retrieval functionality on our public website that gave the ability, what we call OverflowAI, where people are able to ask a question in natural language and get answers straight from the corpus of 16 million questions, but a Gen AI summarized answer. So we will continue to experiment with things like that as the industry moves very rapidly. And again, we're watching everything, including open source, which is quite fascinating to observe. So we will you'll see more innovations from us over time.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned, the integration with some of these code generation platforms, or putting it on Visual Studio. That's for programmers as they're working, for example, in Visual
Correct.
Studio, and they have a question, and they can, without having to go to another window or something, they can immediately tap Stack Overflow's knowledge base.
Indeed.
But increasingly, as these agents are writing code, um, will the agent be able to access that knowledge
Yes. Yes.
itself? Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you
Great.
talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So what is fascinating is that we almost see in the context of our data, there are two big opportunities for us. One is all the LLM pre-training examples that I just gave you with all the big LLM companies, the cloud hyperscalers, and everybody that we've got a relationship with there. But more recently, what we have with the explosion, of course, agentic AI as a topic in the industry, and very much the pursuit of the ecosystem to create these agents, especially in companies, so that they can assist every employee to be able to do their work a lot more effectively and productively, to free up a lot of their capacity to other things. We see an absolute opportunity for our content, both our public platform content, knowledge on Stack Overflow, plus the private Stack Overflow knowledge base with our enterprise product, which is again within thousands of companies, where they have a proprietary Stack Overflow within their company to share information. We're noticing, Craig, multiple examples where companies like Uber and a whole bunch of other super, I would say, forward-thinking companies building AI assistants or co-pilots, or you can call them agents as we move into this next world of creating really sort of performing action, and they're able to tap into the knowledge store of Stack Overflow for teams, and now the public Stack Overflow knowledge, to be able to empower those agents to be really, really effective and accurate in the moment where the developer is trying to, let's say, delegate tasks to that agent to perform things. So as we know, whether it's LLMs or AI agents, they're all very dependent on high quality knowledge to be able to either provide information, search results, or perform actions on your behalf. And so that is why I think we believe this is a tremendous opportunity for us, both for our enterprise business as well as our public platform.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as an example, again, I'm not a programmer, but I'm eager for these multi-agent systems to work, and I've got access to a couple of them. And as if I try and write a simple piece of code, for myself, inevitably, when it runs, I get a bunch of errors, and I'm sure what many other people are doing as well. Then you copy the error back into the system, or into a chatbot or whatever it is, and it gives you a solution. You copy that back, and you end up going down a rabbit hole. It's like a
Yeah.
house of mirrors. You pretty soon you're lost. Um, could the integrations with multi-agent systems address that, where the system, I don't know, I assume they're accessing a knowledge base in the weights of an LLM to solve, to answer a question, or I mean, to solve an error. But I don't know whether it's just the inherent probabilistic hallucinations of the models. Anyway, it just doesn't seem to be very effective.
Yeah.
But are you working on that, where an agent, uh, if it runs into a problem, then could refer to Stack Overflow and get a solution that'll actually work?
100%. I mean, this is exactly what I meant when I said the Gen AI tools that people are beginning to leverage and testing and piloting and so on do hit a complexity cliff.
Right.
like your example, I've also experimented with plenty of coding Gen AI tools. And when you do actually hit very much a sort of a cliff where it's really not able to keep all the context that you have in mind, and it has to do with a data scientist can explain all the reasons why, or a machine learning expert. But the point being that there's still a dependence on high quality knowledge, and it's not yet where the kind of the system is truly automated, where it can completely automate all your work, especially in more complex tasks. I can totally see the foundational work, the simple questions, the simple programs. Absolutely, right? It makes a lot of sense for those to be solvable and through this new mode of this user interface. But ultimately, there is still a pretty large gap, especially for more advanced programming needs, where you're absolutely going to need to know how to debug it. So oftentimes we do see people come back to Stack Overflow after they hit the complexity cliff, which is why I was explaining previously, why don't we get users to be able to ask questions straight from that point of kind of issue that they have, even in the Gen AI tool, straight onto Stack Overflow, so they complete the task. And we help the Gen AI user. So absolutely, and over time things will get better. There's no question, because that's just progress. And we will just want to make sure that we're adding value to the developer. What we are trying to do is focus on the developer, add value to them. And two additional concepts that are important here is, one is going wherever the user is, right? And so for our fundamental thesis is to make sure that we serve our developers wherever they are, and we call this concept knowledge as a service. Because we just want to provide Stack Overflow knowledge, public or a private Stack Overflow knowledge, wherever the developer is in their workflow, whether that's in a coding Gen AI tool, that's in an IDE, whether that's in Slack or Microsoft Teams or anywhere else in your company or what you're using. And then secondly, we want to make sure that we are really sort of serving these users kind of in an authentic fashion, where they are getting access to true experts, human experts when they need them, that they can trust this information, and that the world's best JavaScript programmer, either on the public platform or your best JavaScript programmer within your company, is able to validate the answers that are coming out of these AI answers from these LLMs and Gen AI tools.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just as you were talking, the Gemini integration, where that's if you're working with a code generation system, you can go to Stack Overflow and can you copy code into Gemini and ask it to query Stack Overflow about what to do in this situation, or do you have to explain it in natural language what you're trying to do?
You can do either. I think that if you look at the Gemini experience, so now if you go to Google Gemini Code Assist, which is their code editor, you can type in, how do I do XYZ on Kubernetes, and it's going to provide a Gen AI summarized answer, and it's going to have links back to Stack Overflow underneath it. And you can click to those links, come to the the canonical answer that has been generated by an expert, God knows when, and that is then going to give you confidence that that this answer is in fact accurate. So absolutely, you could paste in things into Gemini, and that Gemini, all the Gen AI experiences are similar. I'm not sure about you can probably state very specifically, hey, go look at Stack Overflow and find out, but I don't think you even need to do that, because it's going to generate the links automatically, because that's what the data is trained on. The other thing I was going to mention is that, in the same spirit of going where the developer is, many years ago, Craig, we always thought about Google search or any search engine as the user interface for Stack Overflow.
Mm-hmm.
So 99% of folks went to a Google search when they had an issue. They would type in a question and it would land on Stack Overflow because the answer was always accurate. Now the user interface has changed, where increasingly people seem to leverage not only a search engine, but also these Gen AI tools as their primary mode of engagement onto the web. And so really what's happened is that people change their mode of how they ask questions and looking for answers. And just more broadly, I think search itself, is sort of somewhat of a different, it is changing, obviously, as we know. And that is what we are trying to adapt to. We're trying to adapt to the fact that previously we were linked to the user interface being Google. Now, if the user interface is all these Gen AI tools, great. We will also then make sure our data and our knowledge is provided in all these Gen AI tools. So we want to just move with the times.
Yeah. You on Stack Overflow for Teams, you mentioned a private Stack Overflow. I mean, how does that work? Is that yeah? How does that work?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So back in 2018, this is about 6 months or about a year before I joined the company. There was some early signs that large companies really loved Stack Overflow because you can obviously get this community curated knowledge, upvotes and downvotes and gamification and all these things. A really effective way to keep knowledge up to date and accurate, and with a communal sense. And a lot of folks wanted to leverage this internally within their companies because they wanted all that data and knowledge to be proprietary within their own company versus showing up on the public web. And so the company launched Stack Overflow for Teams, a private enterprise version of Stack Overflow for companies to use for knowledge sharing within their companies. And that's effectively what it was. And companies like Microsoft and Apple and all these sort of big companies that were leveraging the platform. And the goal was effectively, how do we make this sort of the default knowledge base for all technologists within companies? And so over the next several years, we very much went on that drive. And so, we now are used in pretty much every financial institution that you can think of, all the banks, all the retail companies, all online retailers, the big tech companies certainly all use Stack Overflow for Teams as a private knowledge repository for their technologists' information. And now that is being surfaced, as I mentioned previously, in the case of Uber, as one example, where they're leveraging for their AI co-pilots or AI assistants. And those co-pilots are now leveraging the data that's been created. Thousands of questions inside Uber are now being leveraged in an agentic sense inside the company through this new
Yeah. And this private knowledge that's held within Stack Overflow for Teams is you also have access to the public Stack Overflow.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah,
That is correct. Absolutely. It's part of your search. As when people use the product, absolutely, how do I do XYZ on, I'll use the Kubernetes example again. So you're going to get, from the 60 million questions and answers, the answers on that topic, which are more public. And then you're going to get, in addition to that, anything that's specific to your company around Kubernetes within your company. So you're going to get both results. They're very clearly delineated as this is a private versus a public answer and so on. But really, really a powerful mechanism for users.
Yeah. And another question I had, how is, I mean, the answers that are generated or that are given on Stack Overflow by experts, are you seeing anyone using an LLM to write those answers? And is that a danger that is the more Gen AI content that gets into the knowledge base, it'll cause some sort of problem. I'm not sure what.
Absolutely. We very explicitly prevent that from happening. And, back in 2020, late 2022, our community very correctly basically said, look, we can't just generate. We saw a massive spike actually in content on the site when people would just started using Gen AI tools and tools like ChatGPT, and a lot of it was incorrect because of the hallucination issue, and it sounds really good but actually is incorrect. And given like the goal of the Q&A part, which is to create this canonical human curated knowledge base, it was literally the opposite of that. So we very quickly, the community and the company, we both together banned all that content, saying, look, you can't just use ChatGPT or any Gen AI tools to generate answers, but let's go speak, let's go understand how we can use this phenomenal technology to solve real problems. So we've spent the next year or so talking to our community, figuring out that they don't trust what's coming out. 40% only of them trusted, but 70% of them wanted to use GenAI tools in some fashion, which is interesting. And so we incorporated GenAI into the public platform, as I described, to provide assistance on questions in our enterprise product. And now we are also experimenting with answers using AI, but we're trying to make sure that we don't do it in the sense of Q&A, because Q&A is a very pristine sort of knowledge base. We do not want to pollute it with AI slop, so to speak. If the internet is now polluted with a lot of just AI generated content, and we do not want to be one of those sites where that happens. There may be very specific use cases in the other lanes, as I was describing to you, in chat or discussions, or maybe even other challenges and other things we do on the site in multiple content types, but outside of Q&A, because we want to, again, protect the quality of that Q&A base, very, very specifically.
Yeah. The other thing is you've in this Q&A knowledge base, you've got, I think you said 16 million
60
million question answer pairs. I've talked to people about breaking data silos and rationalizing and ontology and all that stuff. And when you start breaking silos, you find out that you've got contradictions.
Right.
Have you run any Gen AI systems over the entire knowledge base to make sure that it's consistent, that there aren't contradictions between answers?
Yeah, I think that just the system in itself was, I think, really brilliant about what the founders of this company back in 2008 set up, was the very, very specific rule set to account for all of that, right? So duplicates is a kind of an inside joke within Stack Overflow. So if your question is, it's been asked before, maybe in a different form factor, it's going to get called out pretty quickly, right? And it is a school of hard knocks for that reason. And so the standard's very, very, very high, Greg. So I think almost to a place where it is a little bit tough for new users, or has historically been until our new Gen AI incorporation, as I described to you. But it does account for the fact that within the programming knowledge base, so Stack Overflow itself, it's sort of about half of our traffic, half of our content, and that's 1 out of 185 sites that we have. So the other 184 sites are what we call Stack Exchange sites. And these are other sort of technology topics. So it includes artificial intelligence, server, system administration sort of topics, DevOps topics, and so on, security topics. And so yes, those are more specialized communities where there may be an intersection, but we have kept them somewhat apart. But Stack Overflow on its own is huge because it's got every possible programming knowledge, every cloud technology. It's the massive a part of the technology knowledge base. But the other ones, I don't think we're working on something called unified search across all of the Stack Exchange, across 185, but they've been somewhat distinct over time. But there's the core Stack Overflow knowledge base itself is quite cross-functional, obviously, because given the depth of the knowledge base there, and I think the system that's been set up prevents for the issues that you're describing.
Yeah. Something else occurred to me while you were answering that. Is there a concern that this knowledge base will be stolen by some agentic system that could be pinging? It wouldn't take very long to download 60 million answers.
Yeah. No, that is, I think the way we think about that is back in 2022, 2023, when we noticed that it had in fact been, let's say, leveraged by a lot of the LLM providers. We took precautions to then sort of set up all the anti-scrapers, as I described. We want to stay open and make sure our community has access to all this data, because that's always been, kind of our ethos, which is we're by the community for the community, so they should get access to all the contributions that they provide. We're governed by something called Creative Commons, and so we want to strike this balance of where our community users now have to sort of sign up to get access to the data and tell us who they are. So we know they're not coming from a company, as an example. But if you're a company, if you're a tech company, AI company, LLM company, AI agent company, and so on, you've got to work with us officially, because I think we really can solve your problems as long as you work with us in a through sort of official manner and licenses content in a real way. So yeah, we'll take defensive precautions like the anti-scrapers and rule sets and all that kind of stuff, but we're really trying to say, and the good news is that most companies have embraced it. That's the good news. That's why we've now got relationships pretty much with every big AI and LLM and cloud provider that you can imagine. And there's plenty more that we're working on. There's a long tail of companies that are interested in engaging with us.
Yeah, the licensing this data to code generation systems. Are there any metrics? Can you see the improvement in code generation once they have included Stack Overflow in their training data?
Very much. I think that if you look at some of the, let's call them league tables or the benchmark tables that are coming out on a weekly basis, the companies that work with us are at the top of the list. We can, especially on coding benchmarks, right? Because by the way, also as a side point, Greg, the data that we have is not only is really useful for coding related AI tasks, but also non-coding related AI tasks, because the depth and the iceberg under the water, so to speak, of all the comment history underneath an answer, the curation of downvoting an older answer and a new, more elegant answer to a question, all the things that have happened on that very specific one primitive of Q&A in amongst 60 million of them, that is really, really useful for things like reasoning and really sort of being able to drive logic. So yes, we do absolutely see the performance on the high end of the table associated with us being associated with them. So that's heartening to see, and we had no doubt of that, only because when we continue to run these tests, we even have a technical paper out called Stack Eval, which is like a score that we actually have around various AI models, and when they use our data versus not, and so we can see the big differences between using it or not using it.
Yeah, but with these large models absorbing all of this knowledge and curating their training data more and more, are you concerned that the day will come when Stack Overflow is no longer unique, that data will have leaked out into the public sphere, into these models?
Well, I think that the amount of firstly, there are two things. One is to be able to get access to the data. These are multi-year agreements that are recurring in nature. So the only way you are able to use this data for future model training needs is if you work with us, right? So if you don't work with us, then you can't use it going forward. That's basically the kind of the arrangement. And number two is that obviously we're generating new information. So if you want the new information to continuously to give you the latest and greatest of what's happening in the ecosystem, again with human thought and judgment, then that's the second reason for you to work with us. So I think both. One is more of a kind of a fundamental legal requirement to say you got to work with us if you want ongoing access, and do that on a yearly basis. And then secondly, if you need all the new information, you should also work with us for that reason.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming up to the hour. Is there anything I haven't asked that you talked about at HumanX, or that you want listeners to know?
Yeah. I think that maybe one thing we haven't spent time on a little bit is, if you think about the ecosystem of AI players, the big LLM providers, and of course they're all after the whole from creating like the industry leading LLM, but that's specialized or just more generic. And then you've got the long tail of AI companies that are all vying for this agentic AI future, especially within companies. And I think what we have noticed is that every one of our business lines, Craig, and let me just explain that, which is, we have obviously our public platform, which we've spent a bunch of time on, which is our 60 million questions and answers with millions of people asking questions. And then we have the enterprise business, Stack Overflow for Teams, like we just described, which is used by thousands of enterprises for inside their company for now AI agentic needs. And then we have an advertising business, because we have the fact that we have a lot of traffic and folks are able to showcase their products. And then we of course have our data licensing business that that we've already spent time on. So in every one of these, I think historically people were back in 2022, 2023, I think there's this question about, okay, we need to change our business model. The model of the internet has changed. We've got to change with that. People are no longer just relying on advertising as the sole source. So data quality, et cetera, becomes really, really important. So that's what we've been focused on. But also what's interesting is that a lot of these AI agent companies, what we notice is they really want not only our data and to be able to build great AI agents for the enterprise, but also they want access to our distribution. The fact that we have
Yeah.
millions of people that can try out their products, including the ones that you're trying out. Imagine you have access to the developers of the world to be able to showcase your product on Stack Overflow to say, here's the leading AI agent for XYZ. And it's a huge driver of, by the way, really, really powerful demand gen driver for cloud companies who advertise with us. All the big companies do, Microsoft and the Amazons and the Googles as an example. And so it's a great place for AI agents, agentic companies to be able to get distribution to the developer ecosystem. So that's the other aspect we didn't spend a bunch of time on. So we literally are, we see this as a tremendous opportunity for the company because literally all parts of our company can be useful and moving humanity forward with, being able to access all this AI power in their favor.
Yeah. So the Gen AI future, you guys are embracing it. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of it because,
Yeah.
as I said, it's going to make a lot of operations obsolete. But I think it's important what you were saying about the question and answer, that pristine knowledge base. We need human knowledge that isn't polluted by agentic systems or generative AI answers, that is kind of the ground truth, and then you
Indeed.
build on that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is as I often say, welcome to technology, right? It's nothing but change and progress. So companies absolutely have to adapt. We've had to adapt over the past couple of years to this new future, and we're still making our way. And it's been fun to do all the things that all these partnerships that we've struck, as I mentioned. So I think it's going to open up plenty of opportunities, and I think I would not be overly pessimistic about. It's probably going to have some sort of, I would say it's probably harsh in the near term and good in the long term because, it will unlock a lot more potential for people to be a lot more productive. I think more companies will get created because, again, there's an infinite amount of technology to go, be written, and innovation will keep happening. So I think if people have an open mindset about it, this could be a very, very good thing in the long run. I think near term, you're right. I mean, it probably does create a lot of disruption for teams and hiring plans, and because ultimately, the CFOs of the world are going to have to ask, okay, I've invested a lot in this technology. What am I getting out of it?
Yeah.
So I think that's the reckoning for that will happen pretty soon.
There's a growing expense eating into your company's profits. It's your cloud computing bill. You may have gotten a deal to start, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. What if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that. OCI is the next generation cloud designed for every workload, where you can run any application, including any AI projects, faster and more securely for less. In fact, Oracle has a special promotion where you can cut your cloud bill in half when you switch to OCI. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Skydance Animation and today's innovative AI tech companies who upgraded to OCI and save. Offered only for new U.S. customers with a minimum financial commitment. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/eye-on-AI. That's oracle.com/eye-on-AI, EYEONAI, all run together. Oracle.com/eye-on-AI.